Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the DFO DFS report. A little bit of a different edition. We've got the Four Nations Face-off getting started tonight. Canada hosts Sweden. I guess it's actually Sweden's the home team, but it's in Canada, so I guess Sweden gets last change. So there's that. We don't really know, to be honest with you, how this is going to go. I don't think anybody does. A lot of people online seem to not care at all about this tournament. So a lot of people seem to be super interested. Zach, I don't know where you land in that kind of breakdown. I know I'm very excited for it. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be good hockey. The over-unders opened all at 5.5, so I think that the betting market is a good place to kind of get an idea of what what to expect. And the over-unders opening at 5.5 for all of these games, they're expecting tight checking, good hockey. The overs have been bet up specifically in this game, so looks like we could have some fireworks tonight. Over unders reach 6.5. So I'm excited for it. I think it's one thing that people need to realize, I think, is that this is more or less an audition for the Olympics next year. And okay, of course, Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon, and those guys are going to be there next year. But for some of these guys, this is a tryout. This is their moment to show their country that they deserve to be there at the Olympics next year. And I think it's going to be exciting. I hope it's good hockey. I've had some funny questions or seen some funny questions. Are the goalies going to play the whole game? Like, this is not an all-star event. This is real hockey. So I'm excited for it. How do you feel about tonight?
Yeah, I think my excitement's kind of built up a little bit over time. I was somewhat apathetic to it kind of in the weeks leading up to it and all that sort of a thing. But now that we're kind of here, I'm kind of like, okay, this is going to be cool to see. I mean, like, we've got some great storylines here, especially from the Canadian perspective. McKinnon, McDavid, Crosby playing together for the first time. We've been waiting for something like this for so long. The thing that's a little disappointing is there's no Team North America. So had to put the hat here to honor the best international team to ever exist. But I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be fun. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. And I guess we've all just been so kind of hungry for best on best hockey in some way, shape, or form on an international stage. And now we're finally getting it. So I think there's some reason to be excited for sure.
I think the one thing I'm in agreement with you, like, I wasn't super gung ho, and then all of a sudden, once you started to see the lineups get put together, you're like, holy shit, this is going to be a lot of fun. So, welcome into the DFO DFS report. We're going to break it down the best we can. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult. It was super difficult to even put projections together, but we're going to do our best to try to help you win some money tonight, hopefully, and have some fun doing so. The game kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you're not aware, dailyfaceoff.com, we're going to have the projected lineups for all four teams throughout the tournament. So let's just start there. We'll roll through the lineups and kind of gauge our interest on both sides here. So before we get to the lineups, though, I just want to let you know that Canada minus 245 home favorite, or not home favorites, I guess road favorites, and I guess I could switch these two. Sweden plus 200, 2.5 implied total for Sweden, 3.8 for Canada. So we'll start with Canada. Sam Reinhart, Connor McDavid, Mitch Marner will be together on the top line. You got Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon together, buddies from Nova Scotia together there on the second line with Mark Stone, Brad Marchand, Braden Point, and Seth Jarvis. A little bit of energy on that third line. Then you got Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, Travis Konechny on the fourth line. I mean, just a plethora of talent here on the Canadian forward groups here. Let's get to the D pairs. We've got Devon Taves and Kel McCarr. They're obviously familiar with each other from Colorado. Got Josh Morrissey and Colton Parayko on the second pair, and Shea Theodore and late addition Drew Doughty. Good to see him in here for Team Canada again. I mean, pretty crazy. He just returned to the Kings lineup like a week ago, and now he's ready to rock in the Four Nations. And then the power play units. This is where things get real fun. You've got Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Sam Reinhart, Cale Makar, and Connor McDavid on the top power play unit. Just an absolutely lethal unit. And then Mark Stone, Braden Point, Mitch Marner, Travis Konechny, and Shea Theodore on power play 2. On the Sweden side of things, you've got Philip Forsberg, Elias Pettersson, Adrian Kempe on the top line. A lot of offensive jam on that top line for them. Then you move down to line 2 with Rickard Rakell, Mika Zibanejad, and William Nylander. On the third line, really, really deep forward group here too for Sweden. Jesper Bratt, Eriksson Ek, and Lucas Raymond, I think, is a really interesting line there in line 3. Victor Arvidsson, Elias Lindholm, and Gustav Nyquist on the fourth line. On the blue line, you got Victor Hedman, Jonas Brodin, Matthias Ekholm from your Edmonton Oilers, and Erik Karlsson. And then you've got Gustav Forsling and Rasmus Dahlin as your third pair. And then on the power play, Joel Eriksson, Mika Zibanejad, Lucas Raymond, along with William Nylander and Victor Hedman on the top power play unit. Then you've got Rickard Rakell, Elias Pettersson, Jesper Bratt, Philip Forsberg, and Erik Karlsson on PP2. So, Zach, from a DFS perspective, shout out to our friends, as always, from Roto Grinders for providing projected ownership for today's show. Before we get right into it here, if you want to get $20 off your first month of Roto Grinders Premium, you can do so by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube. Because the NHL is kind of off right now and we've only got the Four Nations, they've extended that $20 off your first month to like your NBA package as well. So if you're just looking to itch that DFS scratch right now and you want to get into some NBA stuff, you get $20 off your first month at Roto Grinders. If you don't really know what to, did I say itch or scratch your DFS, whatever, you know what I mean. So $20 off at Roto Grinders if you want to do that. So basically, I added all the ownership up here. Well, that's broken now, but it was about 125% more ownership coming in on the Canada side than the Sweden side. So you're going to see obviously a lot more ownership on the favorite here. So I think one way to immediately try to get different is by building around Team Sweden. And Zach, I think you would agree with me that in order for Sweden to win this game, it is probably going to need to be lower scoring. They're probably not going to be able to just go head-to-head with the offensive Canada and outscore them. They're going to need to keep this tight checking, maybe win it 3-1, 3-2, something like that in order to have a chance, in my opinion. So first and foremost, any Sweden build I have is either going to consist of Philip Gustafsson as my captain, or he's going to be in every single one of my Sweden builds. I think that's just kind of a must. What do you think here?
Yeah, I agree with you from that perspective for sure. You take a look at the pricing, and obviously it's pretty heavy on that Canada side, and understandably so. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, from a DFS perspective, I guess you could still consider the pricing kind of soft. I mean, you're getting guys like Sam Reinhart at $8,200, Mitch Marner at $7,400. The defensemen are dirt cheap on both sides here beyond, really Cale Makar, who's coming in. I think he's the most expensive defenseman here in the tournament, or at least in this game here. Yeah, $9,400. You take a look at the rest of that group: Rasmus Dahlin, Victor Hedman. There's a lot of really quality defensemen here, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head from thinking about the way that you're building your lineups here. I know for me, I'm definitely not shying away from having two Sweden players in some Canada builds and stuff like that. And I'm actually finding that's something that I'm getting to quite a bit here early on. For me, one spot that's kind of jumping out from the Swedish perspective is that second line. Rickard Rakell at $3,400. He's projecting as one of the top value plays on the entire slate here today. Coming into the tournament, just red hot here as of late. In his last 20 NHL games, 1.3 goals per hour of ice time, 9.5 shots on goal per hour. It looks like he's going to be a guy who can be a real driver of offense for the Swedish side on the second line. And then William Nylander as well at 8,600. I think he looks really nice here as well in this spot. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting from an overall build perspective of the ways to go. The really nice thing, I guess, is that we do have these ownership projections here where we can kind of look at, some of these lower owned plays and sort of pivot options that we have here for these slates.
Yeah, tons of value on the Sweden side for sure. A couple questions here. Think there'll be any fighting? I think that's a resounding no. I would be absolutely stunned. Seth Jarvis was asked if he thought there was gonna be any fighting. He said only if Sebastian Aho challenges him. So I think that kind of just goes to show us how the players feel. And then I guess I did say itch that DFS scratch. So that's on me. My bad. It's been a few days. It's been a few days since I've been live here. So just trying to shake off a little bit of the rust. But yeah, there's obviously a ton of value here on the Sweden side. I think that Rickard Rakell makes a ton of sense. I mean, Erik Karlsson on one of their power play units at $3,600 makes a ton of sense. I think the biggest issue or the biggest challenge in this is trying to project how much each line is going to play. I did my best just based on the order of the lines, but I do think that there's probably going to be a decent amount of overreaction to just the actual order. Who's to say that Canada's third line can't go out and score a couple of goals tonight and really be a difference maker? So, they're obviously super talented as well. I think obviously you're going to want to lean on those top players and those top power play units, but I do think that there is, going to be a lot of leverage in playing those third lines, and maybe it's a Braden Point, Seth Jarvis mini stack, and Seth Jarvis is just dirt cheap at $2,200. So building different lineups like that, I think is a way to get different, obviously, and then a way that you could get a lot of leverage in. If that line ends up having some success, which there's no reason why they can't, they're going to still see probably a healthy amount of ice time. And I was probably, I leaned into the idea that people were probably going to really overreact to the actual order of the line combinations and really heavily base the minutes accordingly to the lines 1 through 4, so that we could find value. Guys like Seth Jarvis, even projected for just 12 and a half minutes tonight, still projects to be an outstanding value play. So that just kind of goes to show, if he ends up playing 15 minutes tonight, because we really have no idea how it's going to work out, he's going to be an even better value play. Two other guys popping up as value plays from the Sweden side of things here, Gustav Forsling and Jonas Brodin. I think they make a lot of sense from a game theory standpoint, in which if Canada is dominating these games, these guys are two guys that do a lot of shot blocking. Now, how much are people really going to be laying the body down on the line to block shots tonight? I don't really know. It's hard to say. But at $2,000, I think it's worth, taking that risk. These are guys that are, do not shy away from that in the real game. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for them to get to, the shot block bonus tonight, especially if Canada is controlling the puck possession. Zach, it's kind of interesting. We both left $700 on the table in our first builds today, and they ended up being the exact same. So you got to try to get different. Building around McKinnon and McDavid, and everyone's going to be doing that. So, it's going to be interesting tonight. Do you have any interest in building like 2 goalie lineups and thinking, hey, this might actually be low scoring? Like, it opened at 5.5. The money's obviously coming in on the over. People are obviously expecting goals, but do you expect that there's a reasonable chance that this could stay low scoring, and a 2 goalie lineup might not be the worst idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you take a look at the line for this game opening at 5.5, right? You talked about, Vegas kind of thinking these are going to be some lower scoring games. I think double goalie lineups are absolutely going to be viable all tournament long here. My build, I've done about 5 complete builds so far. My highest projected build right now is a double goaltender build that also leaves $1,900 on the table. And I think that just kind of goes to show where, especially with this tournament here, and I think early on, as we kind of try and get our feet wet and figure out what these things are really going to look like, is something I'm not going to be shying away from. Like, I'm comfortable leaving, significant salary on the table to try and get some more value and get myself a little bit different from the field here. I think what we're going to be seeing a lot of is a lot of like really Canada heavy lineups. You talk about the ownership numbers, how much more ownership is coming in on this Canada side. So, finding ways to kind of get your lineups different is going to be maybe a little bit more challenging if you're looking for some of these heavier Canadian builds, which I do think is the way to go. I mean, again, you just look at the betting market. Canada's heavy favorites here coming into this game. They've got a very high implied total, 3.8 goals. That's a pretty significant number right there. So, I'm comfortable building around these big guns and finding ways to get different. Playing some of these lower owned players, some of these really cheap guys, leaving money on the table. These are all things that I'm going to be experimenting with here tonight. I'm doing a 20 max, and I'm going to have a lot of really different kind of styles of builds tonight to try and see if something works out there.
Well, the one thing too, right? Like, if we are talking double goalie, if this game ends up being 3-2, even 4-2 Canada, something along those lines, like we've seen Philip Gustafson be capable of putting up 40 save games pretty regularly in the NHL, especially recently. So like there's a possibility in which Canada wins this game. Gustafson still has 40 stops and is one of the higher scoring players on the slate. And then obviously Binnington would be up there as well, given the fact that they would win that game. But yeah, I think they're definitely viable. I don't know how many I'm going to get to, but I like the idea of building a lot of Sweden heavy lineups as well. And just it's super easy to get different that way. And you're going to kind of just naturally leave a lot of money on the table when building around Sweden, just because they are priced so low at basically the entire roster. I mean, if you take a look at the raw salary here, of these players, I mean, outside of Forsberg, Gustafson, and Nylander, everybody's pretty cheap, and I think it's pretty easy to leave Rasmus Dahlin off, considering he's not on a top power play unit. He seems way too priced up there. But then, yeah, like a lot of these guys, you got Victor Hedman on power play 1 at $6,600. I mean, absolutely love that spot. Lucas Raymond at $5,400, power play 1, line 3. I think both third lines are really interesting to me. Like, I love the look of Jesper Bratt, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Lucas Raymond. I think that they could do some damage in this game. You've got Raymond, you've got Eriksson Ek on that top power play unit as well. You got Jesper Brown on PB2. Like, I think that they're a line that I'm going to be targeting from Sweden as a real kind of get different spot. I mean, you take a look at, Lucas Raymond is just coming in at 8% ownership. Eriksson Ek a little bit higher at 21%. And then Jesper Bratt is nowhere to be found, 7%. So they are not garnering a lot of ownership whatsoever. I think that's one line that I'm really intrigued by from the Sweden side of things tonight. Zach, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. We're both going to answer this question, but who is like the one guy that you're 100% paying up for in a lot of lineups tonight? And then maybe who's your favorite value play tonight?
Man, great question. I mean, I think it's a pretty easy answer. Paying up for some of the big guns on Canada, the McKinnon, the McDavid. It just makes sense. I think these are the guys that are going to be driving a lot of the offense. You take a look at their individual projections too. Like, both are expected to see pretty solid shot volume, both McKinnon and McDavid. So I'm expecting them to be big drivers, and I think it's pretty kind of easy to answer that one. Some of these other pay up options that I really like getting to tonight. Sam Reinhart, I'm going to be really heavy on him over the field at 33%. Playing on that top line with McDavid and Mitch Marner. I'm a little softer on Marner than I think I am Reinhart here in this spot. But I think they're both solid options as well. From the Sweden side, I really like William Nylander, mentioned him earlier. Rickard Rakell looking like a great value play. For me, I'm definitely not going to be shying away from the defenseman here either. From either of these sides. Kel McCarr, obviously a great pay up option there for Team Canada. I'm probably going to have a little bit of Rasmus Dahlin, probably not a whole ton. He is only projecting for 3.3%. Ownership, but he is $7,800, so a little bit of concern there. Not projecting right now to see a ton of ice time, but again, like, he's a great defenseman. If they need some help offensively, jumping up in the rush and that sort of a thing, we all know that's something that he has in his game. Josh Morrissey at 5,600, I think he looks like a really solid play here tonight as well. So that's kind of the way that I think I'm looking at it from both sides here. What about you, Brock?
Yeah, obviously those top guns for Canada feel like the best pay up spots. But in terms of value, I mentioned Sweden's third line. I think if you're building kind of like some 5x1 stacks here with Canada and really paying up for some of those top guns, need some salary relief. I've mentioned the third line as well. Seth Jarvis, Brad Marchand, both super cheap, both not really seeing, Marchand really not seeing any ownership at all. If they chip in a goal here in a Canada win, I think that they are a good way to get different and save some salary. Saving salary is not super necessary tonight. Everybody's pretty cheap, but I don't mind that third line from the Team Canada as a pay down spot here tonight, and a low ownership. Like I said, they only need a goal as a line to kind of pay off. And with Braden Point on that line, I mean, I actually tweeted it out. It's going to take me a minute to probably find it here, but if you add all the stats from all three lines to all the lines together, Canada 3 has more goals combined than any line on Team Canada so far this season. So it's definitely a line, despite being the third line, that's got a lot of offensive punch, and they're super, super cheap. So they're interesting to me. Rakell and Carlson seem like the two obvious ones from the Sweden side of things in terms of a pay down option, both seeing good power play time, both seeing heavy usage in the top 6 and top 4 on the blue line. So I think that they make a lot of sense from the Sweden side of things. Then after that, I mentioned the two cheap defensemen there from the Sweden side, Brodin and Forsling. But one guy that also is super interesting to me that is super cheap is Devon Toews, $3,200, probably still going to play a healthy amount of ice time with Cale Makar on that top pairing. And if it's anything like we see in Colorado, that pair is going to see a lot of ice time with the top line, a lot of time on ice with that top 6. So he's going to have a ton of really high-end exposure throughout this game, and I think he can kind of get a lot of those phantom secondary assists. Wouldn't be totally surprised if Devon Toews finishes this game with 2 assists and ends up being optimal tonight, just given how the elite talent that's kind of going to be surrounding him at $3,200. I think he's a really interesting value option tonight. And if you don't want to pay up for Makar, or you can't, or you're just trying to make your lineup look a little bit different, I think he's super, super intriguing. Obviously, we can talk about all these players, but we're not trying to take up too much of your time. Do you have any just final thoughts? Anything you think we missed that you want to discuss before we chat?
Yeah, I was just doing a little bit of scrolling around here, doing a couple quick searches. Obviously, it's been a long time since we've had best on best games, but just looking back at some of those World Cup of Hockey games from 2016, there were some pretty high shot totals in those games. Sitting in the mid 30s, some of those games up into the 40s as well. So I think we could see something similar here in these best on best style format right now, of some higher volume games, which I think even just adds to the validity of maybe being a little heavier on the goaltenders and not necessarily shying away from them here. I know for myself, I kind of tend to shy away from goaltenders a little bit more on showdown slates specifically. But I think for me here, I'm going to try and lean into it a little bit more. And think that, maybe there's going to be some higher volume of shots and stuff like that, especially early on in the tournament here, and trying to go that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that goalie captains are going to be super interesting tonight if they make, if they're out there making 35 stops in a higher volume game. I think that the goalie captains are going to be super popular tonight, but I think they're also going to be super viable. What is the strategy here? Play low owned guys in showdown or eat the chalk? You got to do a combination of the two, right? You got to play the good chalk and you got to find some good value that's low owned. Basically the way I've always just kind of described NHL Showdown is play the studs in your captain spot and just try to correlate your lineup the best you can to your captain. And that's the route that you should go. And then obviously, you're not going to just be jamming in all of the the high owned guys. It's going to be duped. So if you're trying to get different and win take down a tournament, going to have to take some shots here on some of these lower owned guys. I think we've done a good job of laying out some of our favorites. I don't think we can go 22 minutes without mentioning Sidney Crosby's name, and I don't think we have. Obviously, tremendous track record with Team Canada, one of the only guys on this team that's really played any meaningful hockey for Team Canada, and still in a really good spot, $9,200, still in that top six, still going to be on the top power play unit. I think when you take a look at McKinnon, at McDavid being around 50% owned between captain and flex, and then Crosby coming in at 23% owned. He feels like a tremendous pivot spot. And who's to say that Crosby isn't going to be the highest scoring player on the slate? It's completely possible. And at 23%, literally half the ownership of the other two, he's one of my favorites tonight. I think I'm going to end up getting over the field on Crosby and coming in under the field on McKinnon and McDavid a little bit, just because, yeah, are they the best players in the game? For sure. But there's so much talent in this game. I don't think it's as cut and dry as just McKinnon and McDavid are just going to absolutely dominate this game. I think that there's tons of guys up and down this lineup that are going to have big nights. Speaking of which, let's give, we're not going to do the hat trick pick. We're not going to do our head-to-head lineups, but let's do when we do these Four Nations breakdown, let's give our game prediction. What do you think the score is going to be? And then who's going to be the highest scoring DraftKings player tonight? Zach, I'll let you go first. Game prediction and highest scoring player tonight.
Okay, I like this. Let's go with a 4-2 Canada win here. And I really like the shout on Sidney Crosby as the highest scoring player. I'm going to leave him for you if you want him, though. I'm going to go with Sam Reinhart. I mentioned him earlier, $8,200. A great shooter, great scorer there. I think he's going to be the trigger man on that line with McDavid and Marner. So let's see if he can score a couple.
I think the game's going to be a little tighter than maybe the betting line suggests. I think the Sweden team is going to be very solid defensively. It's hard to envision them not. It just kind of depends on what this game is like and how the hockey is. It's so hard. I feel like when we do this show tomorrow, after watching tonight's game, we're going to have a little bit of a better feel and understanding of how this is all going to look. But I'm going to go 4-3 Canada win, and the highest scoring player on the slate, I'll go Sidney Crosby. So that's going to do it for this edition of the DFO DFS report. There's not a ton of these games. We're going to try to do our best to come live and break them down when they are happening. We've got one more game tomorrow. Then I think we got 2 games on Saturday. If we've got enough time, maybe we'll try to jump on Saturday. But the first game starts at 1, so it might be difficult. But we'll definitely be here tomorrow just to kind of do the same thing, break it down. I'll still have the projections tomorrow as well. So stay tuned. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Best of luck tonight. It's going to be fun no matter what. Have a great night. Good luck, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, cheers.
Cheers.